So our speaker today is somebody who is well known to us and who always gives us an inspirational message. And he's going to talk to us today about seriousness. So let's get ready, huh? All right, it's Kevin Hauber.
We'll see if we can do seriousness with a smile. How about that? I should have worn a Hawaiian shirt today, huh? That was beautiful. Thank you very much. So every Sunday when I call my mom, who is 98, and still kicking along, every time I call her, she says, "Well, did you do a lesson today?" And some days, of course, no, and other days, yes. And so I realized that I could do this lesson on seriousness today, and that it would be recorded so I can share it with her, by YouTube. So this one's for Mom. And we'll add Mom into prayer. She is in a nursing home at present, having been in and out of the hospital a couple times over the last month and been having a rough time of it. So this one's for her. So the quote that I'm going to share with you, first quote I'm going to share with you is from Richard Rudd. And he says that seriousness is about how deeply submerged we are in the drama and suffering of life, right? Often we become stuck in our own seriousness, whether it be about science, politics, service, money, our bodies, or religion. And the worst thing about that is that it gets in the way of friendship. It gets in the way of fun, play, exploring, and above all, delight. To forget our eternal nature is to take on a deep level of constriction that hides the good fortune we're here to discover. Ever looked at it in that way? That's a wonderful perspective. So I think this is going to be an interesting subject to discuss because it's a reframe. It's something that we can look at in a different way and be able to get something good out of it. At least I anticipate this is going to be a good discussion, and you can let me know afterwards, or not. So the title of the talk is The Shadow of Seriousness. The Shadow of Seriousness. And it comes from an observation that I've had for a long time, that there are many people in the world that are just way too serious about everything. And that's something, frankly, that I need to catch myself at times, or have Kristen monitor me and say, the serious meter is pegging. So I assume that we are all acquainted with the Buddhist perspective that our soul incarnates and excarnates over time, over the eons, lifetime to lifetime, back and forth across the veil. You've all heard that, right? And we gather experience and wisdom until at some point we just don't need to incarnate anymore. We don't have lessons to come back into form to learn. Now that perspective, it has a certain logic to it and such that the rational mind can get a hold of, at least sort of, and be able to get around. And that, for me, that helps to lift some of the stress of having to get it right every time. Because there might just be a lifetime or two where we don't get it right. We have to learn, that's what I don't want. and that it takes some of the life or death desperation out of it. Now, how easy is it to remember that, though, when we are stressed, or when we are in pain, or when we're under pressure? It's really hard in those moments to remember that we're going to incarnate and excarnate back and forth across the veil as many times as it takes to be able to let our soul evolve. Tough when you're really suffering, isn't it? All of that knowledge about the continuity of life goes out the window when we're under that kind of stress. And then there are the materialists that don't hold any concept of the continuity of the soul at all. For the materialist, the view is that what you see is all there is. Know any folks like that? Now, someone with this view is going to get very distressed when things are not going well. Forget eternity. I know what I want right now. Right? And speaking of forgetting, there's also that aspect of being incarnated where our remembering of any prior incarnation experience is just not available to us. That's part of the mystery that we live in. And that can be a really hard thing to deal with, as most of us don't have instant access to that cosmic memory bank. That lack of perspective is a serious issue, pardon the pun. So the point is that the fear associated with those moments of not remembering our eternal nature can be really distressing and really intense. And that the knowledge of our eternal nature can be very difficult to remember at times. That's part of our human condition, isn't it? I'm sure we've all experienced that. Now, for the quiz at the end today, here's one of your takeaway pieces. Attachment leads to suffering. Suffering leads to seriousness. Ever thought about it in that way? Attachment leads to suffering. Suffering leads to seriousness. The shadow of seriousness is a very consuming thing. How does that show up in your life? So I would say that many are attached, many of us are attached to our victim narratives. Now, when I say a victim narrative is something that says, oh, I can't because. And that can take multiple forms, and often does take multiple forms. So that victim narrative, it's really hard to talk someone out of their victim narrative. Have you ever noticed that? You know, how identified we can all become with our victim narratives, regardless of the evidence that you offer. Try it sometime. When someone's really convinced of their victimhood, try talking them out of it. Think of that in terms of people that you know. Are there people who are so serious all the time? Usually about some issue, / victim narrative. Everything is a life or death issue. And I'm just thinking in terms of a few people that I know in that regard. And it requires so much energy to resolve right now. And it has to be resolved right now. And then, when that's resolved, there's the next life or death issue. It's the roller coaster. It's craziness. That or the problem is so big that it will never be resolved. You know of what I'm speaking, right? You've had people who've tried to take you on this roller coaster ride with them in their life. It feels dramatic, doesn't it? Lots of drama in that. And that's because it is dramatic and unnecessarily so. There is plenty of drama that spirals upward more and more and more all the time. Now, for me, that shadow of seriousness, that drama, is exhausting. It's something that takes the air out of the room. It takes the joy out of interactions and conversations. And yet, most of the time, if you notice, it is completely unconscious. Have you noticed that? That whoever is being serious usually feels so justified because what they feel serious about is so important. So important. And if you're not for me, you're against me. Speaking of, you're not for me or against me, have you noticed how serious many religious people can be? Ever notice that one? It has to be just so, and if it's not, everything and everyone is going to hell in a handbasket, despite the fact that the hell is self-inflicted. Yeah, that's the real key, isn't it? It's an election year. Politics is the same way, with everything being taken so seriously. Here's a huge problem. Let's throw money at it. All of the kind of stuff that gets grandstanded about for me, is so tiresome. And yet, we'll just make these issues. And that's true on the right and the left, isn't it? I mean, it's not a one-sided thing. It's really, it works both sides of the spectrum. And it can show up in self-development work also. When we're doing our own work, one's faults and one's shadows can become all-consuming and can even result in wound worshiping in a very serious way. So what do we do about the shadow of seriousness? How do we work with that in our lives to be able to do that reframe that are talking? How do we raise the energy? So let me go back to Richard Rudd for a moment. And by the way, Richard Rudd is the one who wrote the Gene Keys that I find to be a wonderful reference text if you ever want to take a notion and get into that. So Rudd says that synchronicity is an energy field available to absolutely anyone. And the only prerequisite for tapping into synchronicity is delight. Another keyword on the quiz later, folks. In other words, you must remain open to surprises, let go of where you want life to take you, and trust in a force beyond your control. Oh, but I want it to look this way. Trust in a force beyond your control. Delight is the sense of freedom that emerges from an appreciation of the richness of being alive. Nothing really matters but life and love. It's time to enjoy life's small pleasures and relax into your own body, no matter how life appears to be. The less seriously one takes life, the easier it is to get out of your own way and allow life's delightful surprises to lead you in the perfect way and time. Time to let go of the past, release all agendas, and keep your mind as open as your heart. So, how do we do that? Well, let's talk about some ways of being less serious and focused more on delight. So, number one, start your week with delight. So find a podcast or find some music or find some dance, something that fills you with delight. Second idea, let go of something. Creating spaciousness will boost your mood. What weighs you down? What annoys you? What consumes you? And how would it feel to let that go? Let go of something, or let go of lots of somethings. This was an idea that came up that I thought was really interesting. One author says, I'm not usually a meal planner, but thinking about what to shop for, cook, and even eat feels a little overwhelming lately. So this week I planned a week of meals. Then I bought the food, prepped the produce, and don't have to think about it anymore. Keep the meals simple and repeat a few meals. P.S. Not sure if this is something that will stick, but even just a week of relief has been delightful. Kind of a fun idea. Number 4, admire animals. Love up your cats and dogs. And I know for a lot of us in this room, that's no problem whatsoever. Tell them how amazing they are. If you don't have pets, watch a few adorable goat or cow videos. Anything that will make you think, "Aw," or "so sweet." That'll do. Number 5, turn off the news. It's too much. If you want to stay informed, read a few bullet points once a day or once a week. You don't have to watch the news constantly or follow anyone on social media who is outraged on a minute-by-minute basis, inundating you with disturbing images, videos, and thoughts. Who might that be? When you feel bothered by the news, no matter how it's shared, remember that you are allowed to curate the information you consume. Another quiz point. Break up with breaking news. Number 6, look how far you've come. Take a look back at your calendar or journal from the last year. Notice what's changed. See your progress, because small progress is still progress, folks. Celebrate the tiny steps, the hard conversations, the bold moves, and the other things that didn't get enough recognition at the time. Tell somebody else something you're proud of. Share it on social media or reach out and tell someone about it, and then celebrate. And that brings up a point that I think is really important, because when we're working with things, we tend to want to be able to get through the stuff that we're working on. But then how do we celebrate actually accomplishing that? That's something that's really important, and that can bring a lot of delight. Number 7, don't believe everything you think. 2 quotes stood out for me this week. First is from Byron Katie. She says, "Notice just now, in this moment, other than what you're thinking and believing, are you okay?" And then the next quote is from Ram Dass. He says, "We're sitting under the tree of our thinking minds, wondering why we aren't getting any sunshine." So Ram Dass. Okay, so here's a quick list of 7 ways to lighten up. Think like a kid. Take everything lightly. Smile at your own mistakes. Make fun of yourself. Don't think too much. Live only in the present. And don't stress about things. So, enough said. This idea of transforming seriousness into delight is our assignment for this week, and I welcome your input and feedback about it. In the social hour, why don't we talk with each other about what helps us shift from seriousness to delight? So thank you, bless you, namaste.